welcome to another one of our series in the Microsoft, Citrix, HP, and BitTitan webinars that we've been doing. And today we're going to talk to you about hybrid cloud VDI. So you may have seen other sessions that talk about GreenLake VDI 2.0. So we'll sort of touch on GreenLake VDI here, but what we're going to do is we're going to go into a bit more detail around if you want to look at hybrid cloud VDI, what sort of things should you think about? What does it look like? What's the drivers for it? But also why certain versions and certain styles look better than others, things you've got to think about and pitfalls. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Neil Allgood, who's from our UK and I team. And also I'm joined by Chris Hicks, who is our CITRIX guru, who's from the CITRIX team. So welcome to you both. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
So I just want to start with sort of talk about VDI and why hybrid cloud. So I think initially, I just want to sort of call out a very quick observation around where the compute is. So historically, we've all done VDI where we've put servers on premise, we've put our Citrix environment on top of it, and we've given our clients access to it. And the first change that we've had in the last couple of years is to move the management layer, if we're a Citrix house, to move it out to Citrix Cloud. So more and more customers are moving their management layer to Citrix Cloud, which is leaving the on-premise environment as the compute. So although your management and your interface for maintaining your environment is in the cloud, the on-premise compute is still kept next to your application. So because of that, where customers are moving their applications, and we're seeing more and more customers that have a cloud-first attitude, there's a need for people to want to move their environments out to match, maybe put the VDI right next to where their application is sat, because in a lot of time, it's all about the latency. If you've got your app in Azure, you might want your VDI in Azure. You can still keep that ring-fenced environment that you had on-prem, you're just keeping it in the cloud as well. There's also big changes that have happened as well. So with multiple different vendors, there's different functionality between different vendors, but also from a hyperscale cloud provider, there's different functionality that's in there. But a lot of the hyperscalers have really caught up. If we focus here on Azure, and you can even get high-end workstation workloads now that are running in with GPUs and dedicated one-to-one resource available in the cloud. So things have moved forward quite a lot. Historically, we would have argued that if you wanted VDI, you should only do it on-prem. Actually, now we would argue that on-prem is just an option, and it depends on what your needs are. So if we look at what GreenLake VDI 2.0 looks like, obviously, if you go and see Alfred Parkfrieder's session, he'll explain to you what GreenLake VDI 2.0 looks like underneath. However, this is just showing you where the hybrid cloud element fits in. And as we said, Citrix have got the management layer that sits on top of the compute. And that management layer, if it's in Citrix Cloud, you can have the purple box there as well, the Azure Compute, or even Windows Virtual Desktop, which we'll talk about in a minute. And that allows you to have that integrated environment where you can have your compute on-prem, allow your access to your applications on-prem, or you can have that in the cloud, and it's easy to move the users between those workloads as well. So I'll also quickly talk about what is the difference in management styles between the three different elements. And this is something that we talked about in the GreenLake VDI session, but we're going to sort of go into a bit more depth here and understand what the differentiators are between the three environments. So with a traditional VDI and remote desktop services environment, you've got all of the stuff is you manage on-premise in your data center. It's run by you, you maintain it, you manage it. If we talk about GreenLake VDI, one of the benefits of GreenLake VDI is some of it is managed by you, but the majority of it would be managed by us or managed by Citrix. So if we talk about the brokering environment, the ability to get onto your desktops, that's running in Citrix Cloud, that's managed by Citrix. And then when we talk about something like Windows Virtual Desktop or Azure, and then with Citrix layered on top, you're virtually having to do very little on this. There's certain elements that will work with you on the image side of things, but the majority of it is all done by us or by Citrix or by Microsoft. So it pushes a lot of the control. And this is why we talk about desktop as a service. In the same way that you can consume Office 365, where you just log in and your Exchange Online is there and all the servers and everything are run and you've got no idea what actually the platform is underneath, it just works. In this case, we're moving more towards that type of environment where, it is a true desktop as a service. You just click on the icon in your Citrix workspace and magically it appears. And actually the end user is not really care where it lives as long as they can do their job and do it to the best of their ability. So I've rambled on enough. I think it's time to bring Neil and Chris into the conversation here a little bit. So Neil, do you want to tell us a little bit about Windows Virtual Desktop and, what is it? What does it look like,
Yeah, so obviously, Microsoft have recognized that, as organizations are moving more of their workloads into the cloud and recognizing that, there is a need to make sure that users have access to desktops that are close to data and to applications. They've essentially built out their Windows Virtual Desktop environment, essentially built on top of or kind of extended from their RDS solution. So, at its basic level, it's Windows 10 devices built on Azure VMs. There's a really good benefit that they've included around the Windows 10 multi-session, and that's a really kind of big improvement over what was previously, essentially Windows Server, but running in desktop mode. So Microsoft also recognized that, a lot of companies are dealing with a lot of technical legacy debt sorry, I'm trying to come from. Okay, so Microsoft also kind of recognized that a lot of organizations are still struggling with technical debt in the form of Windows 7 and are offering Windows 7 extended support. We come across a number of customers that are still struggling with this, and it's, as much as it's a surprise to us, it's clearly still going on. In terms of the other benefits that Windows Virtual Desktop has, there's the likes of the incorporation of the FS Logics technology, which optimizes Office 365 and profile containers. It allows organizations to kind of migrate from their legacy RDS systems. In a lot of cases, organizations, will have potentially already have the licensing in place to enable them to move to that without any additional cost.
So Neil, are there any caveats that people need to think about with regards to Windows Virtual Desktop? So are there any things where gotchas that people need to think about on Windows Virtual?
Yeah, I think the really big one is obviously as much as it's on the Azure infrastructure, so it's kind of global, completely scalable. It is only on Azure, and it's only been designed to run on Azure. And so where organizations are looking at hybrid, and we as HPE recognize that essentially having a cloud strategy really does mean now that organizations have a hybrid strategy, is that they have to think about how they connect potentially an existing on-premises VDI environment with with the Microsoft environment, and it's not a straightforward thing to do with the native Microsoft tools in this space. So, we look at organizations like CITRIX, for example, who layer on top, those additional technologies that make, Windows Virtual Desktop, run even better. There are optimizations, around the kind of the access connectivity, and I'm sure Chris can talk about a lot of the other benefits around CITRIX that layers on top of Windows Virtual Desktop.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Thanks, Neil. I think that's a good point, Chris, to come in and sort of introduce you as the CITRIX expert from CITRIX. What if a customer has gone and bought Windows Virtual Desktop, or they have Windows Virtual Desktop and they're looking at hybrid cloud, why should they pick CITRIX on top of Windows Virtual Desktop, or even just on top of Azure? What does CITRIX bring as a value? We know about the on-premise value, but what does CITRIX bring to cloud value as well?
Well, first of all, I think Neil already alluded to it. The fact that the environment that has been provided by Microsoft, it has some very unique qualities to it. One of which is being able to extend Windows 7 beyond the point that otherwise people could do it. I think that we add to the mix just as we added to the mix for terminal services, and that is, we expand the client types that can connect in. We remove some of the requirements, some of the stringent bandwidth requirements. You can have sometimes even a somewhat shoddy connection and still get fluid interaction with your applications. We provide some degree of management. Autoscale is listed on here. We provide really a whole layer of security through many technologies that we offer. I guess in summation, what we really provide is we kind of extend the solution to the point that we feel makes it more of an enterprise type solution. So specifically with regard to the administration and the security and the analytics, when you say, why would somebody add CITRIX to the mix? They might not. If it's, I would say, this is kind of, oversimplifying it, but if you have a somewhat simple deployment, you have, not a very complex environment, the client devices that are connecting in are, easily managed. Anything beyond that, which is almost always the case, anything beyond that, what we try to do is we try to provide the best possible end user experience. And at the same time, we try to provide a degree of manageability that allows the whoever's administering this environment to hopefully maintain their sanity during the process.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think one of the things that we've seen and called out as well, where we've seen customers, is they've gone and put WVD in and then gone, oh, we've moved some users to it and they're using the full desktop and Teams isn't working. So that's something else that as you alluded to earlier, is HDX allows for Teams acceleration and offloading. So Teams acceleration doesn't work by default with Windows Virtual Desktop. So if you were accessing a Teams session, it's not going to perform very well. With CITRIX on top, that obviously happens. And it's not just Teams, there's Skype and I think Zoom and lots of other WebEx and lots of other clients that will work with that as well. That's a real benefit, I think.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. Autoscale is something that we've looked at, and I know it's something that you've done a lot of work with, Neil, around with some customers, is the ability to have a Windows Virtual Desktop or even just an Azure environment spun up with VDI with CITRIX cloud management in the middle. And you literally can have it to the point where your on-premise environment, you might have your main VDIs on-premise, as long as your environment that you've spun up in the cloud has the same access via VPN or whatever it is into the same applications that you need access to. It will dynamically start allocating users to that environment. So if you lost a data center for a BCM situation, for example, the autoscale will actually move your users' workloads out to the cloud without you having to do anything. It'll just, 3 o'clock in the morning, you lose a data center, they're suddenly working again because it's all moved to the cloud. As far as I'm aware, only Citrix does that. Is that true?
As far as I know. Was that a question for me or Neil?
I think both.
Yeah. There might be other options out there, but I'm not aware of them.
No.
So yeah, autoscale is it's an important feature, and you had mentioned that before. So yeah.
I think the other thing to add from a Citrix perspective that I'm aware of that I really like is the security wrapper on top of it as well. So one of the other things is things like keyboard keyloggers. And we've had quite a few requests around adding the Citrix security layer on top of the VDI access. So that works on premise, of course, but it'll also work in the cloud, and the ability for you to randomize what the keystrokes look like. There's a really good YouTube video that shows it off to its best of its ability from Citrix Synergy a couple of years ago, which shows a guy connected to a terminal service or to a Citrix session, typing into a keyboard. What he's typing in on the keylogger is just random nonsense, but you can see he's typing in proper text into the session. So there's things like that again, Citrix layers on top that security piece that I don't think, that's a really good benefit, I think, for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also in terms of kind of user experience, the single sign-on and certificate-based authentication that Citrix offers, means that you're not necessarily inconveniencing users from kind of having to log on twice onto a portal and then onto the desktop. So I'm sure Microsoft are looking at that, but obviously that's still a kind of roadmap item for them. It's not really natively available in WVD.
Yeah. So just in summary then, why would you come and talk to us about Windows Virtual Desktop and Citrix and hybrid cloud and all that stuff? So we're sort of in a fairly good position as HPE. We've got partnerships with Citrix, we've got partnerships with Microsoft, and we've got partnerships with VMware. And VMware provide the hypervisor on the GreenLake VDI 2.0 solution. But from this perspective, we've got partnerships with all the main vendors. We're a Citrix service provider, so we can provision, manage, and host new cloud environments for you quickly and easily, and the licensing. We now have Windows Virtual Desktop Advanced Specialization Services status within Microsoft. So Neil is the man who has driven that through, and that's a fantastic extra thing that we now have. We're obviously an Office 365 partner, so we've got skills in Teams and provisioning Teams in VDI environments. We're an Azure CSP, so we can actually provision, manage, and host the new Azure workloads for you. And we're an advanced expert MSP committed to success on Azure through quality managed services. So because we've got the on-prem environment, because we have the relationships with Citrix and Microsoft, actually we can provide a single provisioned full end-to-end secure hybrid virtual desktop solution, encompassing all parts of the spectrum. So we can build you a platform that does the auto-scaling, that does that back and forth movement as you desire, really easily. So
right. And that, honestly, I mean, that it's good that we're all three, in partnership with this, but without your expertise, this stuff would never come to fruition. I mean, it's, there are a lot of features, there are a lot of moving parts, but if you don't know how to correctly assemble them, with regard to security, with regard to performance, with regard to, where your applications are going to reside and your data is going to reside, you could really end up with quite a mess. So it is absolutely vital that you have the expertise of a partner like HPE provide this.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Chris. If you're interested to take this further, we actually do some readiness workshops and discovery assessment workshops around VDI. So we do some around VDI, we do some around Windows Virtual Desktop and around Citrix. We've also created a new 90-minute what's called an immersion workshop, which is very sort of light touch, where we can go through certain elements. But I think if you're watching this, you're probably beyond the immersion workshop, because a lot of the content we've talked about in this is probably in the same thing. So I think if you want to we can do a readiness workshop with you, and that's looking at your environment, looking at your VDI environment, doing some assessments on your VDI environment, looking at where your current state is, looking at where you want to be, and helping you plan that strategic roadmap around, okay, this is how we want our VDI environment to look in 18 months' time, 2 years' time. And we can help build those building blocks that need to get you to that point. I know we've done it with a few large companies, and Neil's been involved in a couple. I know we've talked to Chris about a couple as well. So, this this is something that we do on a regular basis with many customers. And one of the benefits of talking to us about it, apart from what I've just stressed previously, is also we've done it before. And you're not having to relearn or try and gather all this information using Google from all over the place. We've already got this knowledge for you, and we can help you build the right environment for, if you're a finance house or you're a hospital, or, we've got the experience of having done it before with other customers, and we can bring that to you and help design and build you an optimum VDI environment that works for you and works for your end users. The world's changing really quickly, and this is one way that we can help you accelerate forward, especially using things like GreenLake VDI. So with that,
excellent.
I'd like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Good to see you again. And thank you, Neil. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. And
enjoy the rest of the summit, and go and watch some more. Go and watch my evergreen one, which will link to this one as well.
That's great.
Thank you.